Hi, my name is Paige Curiali and I'm a textbook sales representative here at Sage. I wanted to talk about this book here, which is called Where the Wild Things Are. This was a book of mine that was a favorite as a child. I love to use my imagination, and this book does a great job of demonstrating that as this little boy gets in trouble and is sent to his room without his dinner, and he is sent off to this wonderful land that he's created with him for himself and his mind. And I loved that part of it as a child, and I also loved that he decided to go back home and that his dinner was there waiting for him and it was still warm, and that was something that I appreciated a lot as a kid. Now I'm a mother and I have two little boys that are 7 and 4. This again has been a book that's a favorite of ours through both of my children's lives. They also enjoy the nature of the little boy traveling off with his imagination. Our 3 favorite pages are when they roar their terrible roars and gnash their terrible teeth and show their terrible claws. And we get a chance to be silly and have fun together when we read that. So it's a book that is also very special to each of them. And it's a book that we've given to many little boys named Max, as that's the name of the character. So I appreciate a chance to talk more about this book. I think that it's a great book. Like I said, I'm appreciative of the fact that I've had a choice to read it myself and to read it to my boys. Thanks for your time.
So I'm Catherine Forrest, and I'm in the production department here at Sage for production of college textbooks. And I'm talking about To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. It's a coming-of-age novel that addresses social justice and the importance of social justice, and I think that it's really important that it be available to young people, and I was glad to have it available to me as a young person because it gives us a valuable lesson about social justice through the eyes of young people, and really kind of gives their view on learning about social justice through their eyes in the American South, and an important lesson about seeing the value in everyone, even the people who are different from us, and showing compassion to people who are different from us. It's just a critical life lesson that we have to show compassion for everyone, even when we don't understand them. And it really is kind of symbolized in the beautiful image of the mockingbird who doesn't wish any evil on anyone, who just brings joy, and the awful evil that is present in the world that wants to harm just that great innocence. So, this is one of my favorite books, and my copy doesn't look that dog-eared. It's because I've lent it out and not gotten it back and had to buy it again so many times. And I brought my other prop, to show how important this book is to me. It's my jersey, my roller derby jersey. There you go.
Hi, my name is Emily Pace Hunt, and I work at Sage Publications in London. I'm the Conference and Events Executive, and I've been asked to talk today about Aldous Huxley's Brave New World for Banned Book Week. Basically, my thoughts on Brave New World, and I feel like most students who've ever had to read it, their thoughts stem around the idea of censorship, and it's quite ironic that this book itself was actually banned because of the way in which it discusses censorship and the futuristic dystopian world that it creates. Because I think it offended a lot of people at its time. I think it came out in 1931, 1932, and at the time, obviously, we'd just come out of World Wars, and people were looking for a better future. And this book in particular talks about a future that we can imagine, that we say, and satire is better, but is it really? Because it's based on the idea of technology solving all of our problems. And in fact, in the book, you realize that the technology is what keeps you from living. And I think that this book also had a lot of major backlash because of its sexuality and the way it portrayed family. It did away with emotions, so it challenged a lot of religious beliefs. And it also did away with a lot of government, the idea that the government was not for its people and that it was very much just trying to control lesser populations and groups of people who were, say, the 3 lower castes that it describes in the book, which would be the delta, the gammas, the epsilons of the world. And basically, I feel like it got a lot of backlash from that just because it was talking about we as individuals should challenge our notions of what is right and wrong, and we should feel. And that did not sit well, especially in the fact that we had H.G. Wells, describing a future utopian universe And then in much the same way Aldous Huxley does the same thing, but his dystopian, we start to question. We start to go, wait, is that actually better or is it not? And I think the idea of questioning and the fact that we can't have people censoring us and censoring our emotions is what makes this book one of the highlights of like my undergraduate career in reading it for my English courses. And it also is quite prophetic in the way that it talks about censoring emotions and how it itself was challenged to be a banned book because of like governments and religious organizations, groups of people around the world disliking it for the way it portrayed sexuality and questioning of authority. And I still think we can learn a lot from it. Despite it being like created almost 100 years ago, it's still eerily applicable today.
My name is Kerry Barner and I work at Sage Publications in the Journal's editorial department, and I've chosen The Grapes of Wrath for the Banned Books Week. This is my own copy. It's a very beautiful illustrated copy, as you can maybe see there. I got it from a second-hand bookshop in Greenwich for £20. I thought it was an absolute bargain. And the reason I've chosen this one, I read it quite recently, and it was actually a bestseller when it was written back in 1939, but it was also caused a real stir. It was banned and burned publicly by some citizens, but it also won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction some years later. It tells the story of the Joad family who have to travel from Oklahoma to California in search of a better life, and it tackles issues around poverty, discrimination, exploitation. Some of the critics, in particular the Association of Farmers of California, slated it for being communist propaganda and a pack of lies, and it was too much of a socialist tract. But actually he tackles really genuine issues of people who have to leave their own homes due to terrible circumstances, and this was set during the Depression. And I think it has relevance to this day. If you look at the news recently on Syria and all the refugees fleeing from their country, the plight of refugees, people don't want to leave their homes unless they absolutely have to, and everyone has a right to be well treated, and everyone has a right to their own home. So I think that to this day, The Grapes of Wrath is a very relevant and poignant book, and I urge anybody who hasn't read it to read it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gail Bushman, and I am a senior graphic designer for Sage Publications. My banned book is Where the Wild Things Are. I loved reading this book as a child, and it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized that it had ever been banned. And I was actually quite surprised because it was just, to me, all about imagination and creativity and a child's own world of wonderment. I always loved everything about the book, but my favorite part of the book has always been the forest growing out of the child's bedroom. That has always been great creativity and imagination to me, and it's just the child's way of expressing themselves. And as I've grown older, I have learned that this is also a way of dealing with emotions and dealing with reactions and frustration, and a way of escaping from the realities of every day and coming back to it and realizing that not only are you a better person, you are also loved by the people who are around you.
Hi, I'm Jane Whiffen and I work for Sage Publications at their London office. I'm very excited to be talking to you about Banned Books Week. Today I'm going to be talking about Tolkien. He's on the list of banned books, and I was very surprised to see that, as they were books very, very special to me when I was growing up. I was first introduced to Tolkien when I was a little girl, and my dad read The Hobbit to me, and then obviously fell in love with The Lord of the Rings as a teenager. And I have two copies here today because the books are so special to me. My copy, which I brought with me from South Africa when I moved to England, and my husband's copy, and The Lord of the Rings are the only books that we have duplicates of in our house because neither of us was prepared to give away our own copies. They're excellent tales. They're moral tales dealing with good and evil and how the power of one small person can often conquer a great evil. And I think they're wonderful, and I would encourage everybody to read them. Thank you.
I'm Diana Axelson in Reference Content Development at Sage, and the book I've chosen to talk about is Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. It's a beautifully written novel that displays the quest for self-identity and self-worth on the part of Janie Crawford, who is the heroine. She's an African-American teenager at the beginning of the story in Florida, and she comes back after 40 years to return to the town, and she tells the story of her life to a friend. And her life is quite amazing. She eventually survives 3 marriages and the deaths of 2 of those husbands. And throughout her life, she's struggling against the sexism of her time period, and also the racism and classism of that period. But what's remarkable about the book is it's magnificent on several different levels. On the one hand, it is the story of Janie developing through time, but it's also the story of how race and class and gender have influenced and structured her relationships and those in the community around her. One of the key images in the novel is that of a pear tree, and that's part of the sensuality and explicit sexuality for which the book was actually challenged. That seems like a bizarre challenge, but I'll read some of the passages that point to that. This first one is Janie at 16. It was a spring afternoon in West Florida. Janie had spent most of the day under a blossoming pear tree in the backyard. She had been spending every minute that she could steal from her chores under that tree for the last 3 days. That was to say, ever since the first tiny bloom had opened. It had called her to come and gaze on a mystery, from barren brown stems to glistening leaf buds, from the leaf buds to snowy virginity of bloom. It stirred her tremendously. How? Why? It was like a flute song forgotten in another existence and remembered again. What? How? Why? This singing she heard that had nothing to do with her ears. The rose of the world was breathing out smell. It followed her through all her waking moments and caressed her in her sleep. It connected itself with other vaguely felt matters that had struck her outside observation and buried themselves in her flesh. Now they emerged and quested about her consciousness. She was stretched on her back beneath the pear tree, soaking in the alto chant of the visiting bees, the gold of the sun, and the panting breath of the breeze, when the inaudible voice of it all came to her. She saw a dust-bearing bee sink into the sanctum of a bloom. The 1,000 sister calyxes arched to meet the love embrace and the ecstatic shiver of the tree, from root to tiniest branch, creaming in every blossom and frothing with delight. So this was a marriage. And then later in the book, when she's talking about Tea Cake, the third man with whom she at last finds delight and love, she describes him in this way. Tea Cake came prancing around her where she was, and the song of the sigh flew out of the window and lit in the top of the pine tree. Tea Cake, with the sun for a shawl. Of course he wasn't dead. He could never be dead until she herself had finished feeling and thinking. The kiss of his memory made pictures of love and light against the wall. Here was peace. She pulled in her horizon like a great fish net, pulled it from around the waist of the world, and draped it over her shoulder. So much of life in its meshes. She called in her soul to come and see. And that's the end of a marvelous novel.